we're going to look at applying textures to 3D models. It's available at bumpmesh.com. It's literally just a free software, completely open source. There's a lot of different settings here though. I'm going to go through how I apply textures to models, the different kind of controls that you have. You can change a lot of like settings for it. So I'll basically like show these methods. And the reason that I'm actually showing this off to the community is because textures actually is a really big way of changing and in a lot of ways adding value to your 3D printed parts. So with textures, you can hide the layer lines. So if you want to hide layer lines, this is a way to do it because visually you can kind of hide them. You can also add strength and rigidity to parts. So a texture will actually like change the geometry of it, which can make your part, stronger. You can add grip and friction. So if you're making like handles and stuff like that, then textures is a good way to do that. Even with like really subtle textures, you can really change the grip and feel of the part. And then also, of course, the aesthetics of it, which is a really big one, because when we 3D print a really smooth object, if we design like a really smooth face, then a lot of the time we can get a shiny kind of appearance, and that might not be what you're looking for. And then usually when you're adding a texture, you kind of soften the way that it's reflecting light because you're making it scatter light a bit more instead of reflect it like a mirror. All right. So this is a texture. It's literally just an image of, and it's a black and white image. Now, it actually can be gray as well, but with this one, and we'll go through what gray means, but where it's white, it's not going to be applying any change to the surface. And where it's black, it's going to be creating an offset from the surface that will match one of the settings that I'll show you. It's the amplitude. This is the basic setup of your texture. Now, if I have gray here, so let me open up a blurred texture now. So I'll put this next to it. You guys see that? I'll chuck this one there and there. So I've got two textures now. One's blurred, one's just black and white. Now, if I zoom into the blurred one, it goes from solid black to solid white with a transition. Say where it's 50% between, so 50% gray or whatever, then that is where we're going to have half the amplitude applied. So in this respect, I'm creating like a texture smoothing effect, okay? So let me show you our first setting, which is basically, actually, let me upload that texture first. So what you have here when you go to bumpmesh.com is you just get a cube, but I can load any model. I'm just going to keep the cube for now. And then you can upload a custom map. So that's your texture or your PNG file, whatever you want to call it. They're all the same thing. So I'm going to go upload custom map. I'm going to go to my downloads and go leather texture PNG. And you can see here, if I zoom in, I get this really small leather texture that gets applied, right? If I change the texture height, is the height? Oh no, sorry, yeah, it's not called amplitude here, it's called height. So if I change the height, you should be able to see, so I'm updating. Oh yeah, it is updating, but I don't have 3D preview on, so let me hit that. So you can see here, I put 3D preview on and actually changes the way that the model is viewed to actually show the physical change in the surface. So that is probably too high there that I've got it. I'm gonna chill it out a little bit. Chill. And now I've just got this really nice subtle leather texture. And if I zoom into the top of the surface here, you can see that it's actually bumpy now. That's because I have 3D preview on. So if I take that off, then it just applies like the actual image to the face. It's still a smooth body. Because then if I go to the side, see how it's still a perfect square? But it's not going to be because I've applied the texture. So I leave 3D preview on, and then it actually makes those bumps actually bump and come out. You can see how easily I just applied this texture to this face. Is there any problems with this? Could I go and 3D print that? Now, if I look at the bottom here, it's actually automatically not applied the texture to the bottom. That's an interesting feature from Stefan. So he's made it so the bottom automatically doesn't apply the texture. So he's used basically he's excluded the bottom with, where is it? It's called texture mapping. Yep, so see here under masking, not mapping. See here under masking, we've got bottom faces. So if I turn that to 0, the bottom face has now got the texture applied. So depending on your model, the orientation that it comes in, you might want to turn this on or off, right? But if I go and 3D print this now, and I've got a texture on the bottom face, that's not really going to work, okay? And I can like really easily prove that to you. So I can export this as an STL, and I'm going to open, once it downloads, I'm going to open that up in Bamboo Studio. Now, if you go print that texture, the bottom surface is going to have like hundreds of like little contours. It's not going to work at all. That is on the bottom face. On the top face, you're also going to have issues. It will 3D print, but the texture itself will look absolutely terrible, okay? Because of the print orientation. You got to consider how it's actually printing here. So once I get it into here, it'll be more clear. So let me go and import this. So you can see it's black, so it's probably a bit hard to see. Let's go a lighter color. There we go. So, actually, it looks like leather now. Cool. So you can see I've got all my little bumps here on the bottom and the top. And if I go and hit slice, it's going to go and slice this file. Now, this is going to take a lot longer than a normal cube, because a normal cube doesn't have to take all these like little turns when it's like slicing. It's got like one print line for each edge. This has like 1,000 on each edge. So it's actually going to take way longer to actually slice, and probably and actually also a lot longer to print. So what you typically do when you're slicing textures is you get a benefit with adding a texture. You don't see the layer lines as much. And that is why we usually, what I would usually recommend is, if you're going to use a texture to hide layer lines and you create this visual appearance, you can increase your layer height to kind of accommodate for the increase in print time. That's what we tell people that do this part, and people that do like automotive stuff as well. So you can see on the bottom here, look at this. My first layer is terrible. That is not going to work. I mean, it might work if you have nice adhesive spray and settings and all that, but it's not going to look good. It's not going to look like your texture. Then your sides are going to look really nice. And here I've got this only really subtle texture, so I'm going to have to change the texture settings, okay? Because it's not really coming through exactly how I want it here. And this is the difference between when you go from your mesh, from your bump mesh, from actually applying the texture to printing. Because here, it looks perfect, right? But the texture is probably a bit too small. The actual size, the amount that it's coming out, is probably a bit too small as well. And that's why when I go and actually put it in here, I'm not getting that leathery effect there. I'm getting a little bit, you can kind of see it, right? But it's not like coming out, it's not as pronounced as I'd like it to be. You can see on the sides, it's kind of working, right? But if I go to the top, look at the top. The top is completely flat. And that's because the texture on top there, if I go back to the Prepare tab, you can see the texture's there. It's just being ignored because the actual detail of that texture is too little. So print orientation matters. Now, how would I get around that if I was wanting to print this with the texture on all sides? What would I do? Any guesses? Is your pop quiz for the day? Is it too early for a quiz? I'm going to grade you. Smaller nozzle, or line width. Okay, let's try that. Let's go diameter 0.2. Now, so it doesn't take 10 years to slice, I'm just going to put it down to here. Same thing. The bottom won't apply. It'll just be flat, but we'll see if it works on the top, okay? Smaller line width. Do you mean layer height, Joe?
No, I was thinking if you don't have a 0.2 nozzle, you could use a 0.4 with a 0.32 line width.
Yeah, cheat a little bit.
Same,
yeah.
Same thing with 0.2, same.
Yeah, fair. I'll go 0.2 because it's all theoretical right now, and I'll go 0.1 millimeter layer height. That's half of what I had before. So let's go slice it.
And come back
what
next
we're going
year
to see,
for it.
take some time. Sometimes you just need that part, right? And if you're only making one or whatever, then you might be fine. Something that I'm like interested in to see like people doing, and I haven't really seen this. Maybe I got to think of it, more. But is printing a textured mold and then softening the part and then kind of like creating that that way. Because you don't have to just print the part. You can print like stuff that helps you make the part. But usually, if you want to make a lot of something, you're not going to be, doing a manual step. But it might be cool if you're only making a few of them. Yeah, tilt at 45 degrees, Cameron. So yeah, that's the way to do it. So right now we can see with the 0.2, we're getting an improvement, right? On top here, we've got all these little bits, but this isn't gonna show nicely. It looks cool when it prints. It's just gonna look completely different to the side texture, which now actually that we've used the 0.2 is looking more like leather already, right? Because it can pick up more of those details. So yeah, what we end up doing with this is, we go like this. we rotate it around 45 degrees, whatever 45 degrees is. Not quite right, but you get the idea. So if we do it like that, now you might be thinking, hang on, you want it to be on a flat base. Yes, you ideally want to print on a flat base. You don't need things to be printed on a flat base. So what I would usually do with a part like this is paint on support materials. So I go with the circle tool. So I did this with an automotive part that we printed the other day. We printed it with ABS carbon fiber. Now, if you've ever used the carbon fiber filament, it gives you a natural texture. It's awesome. Like, you actually can't even see the layer lines, and it's 0.2 millimeter layer height. Like, it looks incredible, this part. But I actually printed basically max height on one of our printers. So it was like, it filled up the print bed. I printed it like a part like this. It basically had zero contact with the print bed, but I just used support material. And what I do is I increase the pen size on the main edge. I think that's what I did. It's this initial one, because I wanted like a good base. And then just every so often, I did like a dot like this on each side. So I'm painting on support there. This car part it needed support right at the top as well, like near the top. So it also had like, another connector right at the top, like a big solid tree, which was good. And then what you go to support, enable support, and then this is tree manual. So if you're painting on support, you don't want it to apply support everywhere. You want it to apply just where you're telling it to, and that's where you use tree manual here. And then we hit slice. Now this will probably take a while with the 0.2 nozzle. Let's go back to 0.4, and we'll go. Yeah, we'll just leave it on standard. It'll take a while to slice. And this way, all the textures are printed around the outer contour. When it gets to the top, there's no like texture that's on like a flat face. That's what we want to avoid when we're printing textures. Okay, there we go. So you can see here, I've still got all my texture applied on these faces. Now we have to change the settings like we mentioned before. And I've got these supports that come in. Now these supports are quite bulky. I did a big pen size. Now, if you found that you were getting scarring and it just wasn't looking right, you could obviously decrease that. It's like a trade-off between support to actually keep your part printable and then, aesthetics as well. Or you might want to put those supporting regions on areas of the model that are more inconspicuous, or that they're not visual or something like that. Okay, any questions? That makes sense? Yeah, so you can definitely print parts like this, and yeah, we see people doing this with like enclosures, or even if they just want to like get their part to be like bigger, to put it on like a big angle, like through the chamber. If they're printing like long kind of cylindrical parts, they can get like the maximum like distance. It's obviously going to increase your print time to do it like this, but you're going to get the appearance that you want or the size that you want, which is kind of like, yeah, the trade. And there's always a trade when you're manufacturing. Quite rarely do you ever like put a setting on that isn't going to have like some sort of negative effect. Usually there's a trade with all this stuff. Like, for example, like if this was like a part that I wanted to be strong, I could always increase my infill and wall loops and stuff, but that's going to take longer and cost more. So like there's always like a bit of a trade, right? Okay, so that is that. But my model didn't quite show that leathery texture as much as I would like it. And this is where we start to get into these other settings. So firstly, the texture on the top and the bottom, let's say I just didn't want them. Say this was like a handle or something, and on the top and the bottom, I just don't want the texture. So I can go to masking, and this basically allows me to like control. It's some sort of algorithm that gets applied to it, and basically it's going to be looking for the top and the bottom when I use this slider, and it's going to be hiding it. Where it shows up in gray, it hides it, right? Just to give you a better idea, if I, let's go add a primitive. So you can right click on the bed and add a primitive here. Export this as an STL. So I'm going to use a benchy here. Yeah, benchy instead of a cube, because the cube's kind of too simple. So load models in the top right. Look how quickly this is going to apply the texture from when I double click it. Now, mind you, this is like a 10 to 20 minute process when you do it with like Blender. Look how quickly it did it. That's insane. So if you know how long it takes you to do it, yeah, it's just incredible how quickly this does it. So now you can see with the benchy, it's hidden all these top faces. But if I come down to masking, I can reduce that. See how it's kind of like, it's like changing how many top layers it's using, but I'm sliding it left and right here. So you can kind of control like how much of it you like apply. So here, if I did it like that, that's probably good. It's unfortunately masking those layers, which I might want. I don't know. It's just going to depend on your orientation. that you want to print it in and where you want the texture applied. But that's how you use masking. I can do the same on the bottom. So now I have a really flat base to do all my actual printing, right? I need that. And then the other thing that we had is that this texture wasn't being applied enough to actually visually like really see it. So what I think I'm going to do is two things. I want to actually make it bigger. So you can see here under transform. Can I make this bigger for you guys? Oh, there we go. Transform. I can actually make the texture bigger. Does that come through clearly on the screen? So I can make it really big, but I can make it like a little bit smaller or bigger. And you can actually scale this in the X and Y direction. So like I could stretch the texture. See how I'm stretching it left and right now? So in U, this is an engineering. I don't know why they do this. X, Y. Oh, is it like vector recognition? Anyway, so X, Y, Z direction. You've got like UV. Is it UV, Z? UV, W, X, Y. I don't know. Anyway, so they use. It's just the same as X and Y. I don't know why they change it. Honestly, because it doesn't make too much sense to me because we've got an X, Y, Z label here. So anyway, the scale in U is X. But there, yeah, you can hit the unlock button and stretch it in one direction. This is cool. You could do this another way though as well. You don't need to do it here. You could actually, German. Yeah, that's a good point, Joe. Yeah, so it's a German. So yeah, probably that. Yeah, so you can actually change your texture PNG file as well to do this. This is just a quick way of doing that, right? This is actually just changing your PNG file that then gets applied to your model. So the PNG file that we applied to this, in case you didn't see it, I just went to upload custom map and I hit leather texture and I opened this leather texture onto that model, okay? Yeah, nothing too crazy. There's all these other little ones that you can like select here. But let me go back here. I'm gonna hit unlock again so keeps the aspect ratio the same. And I've got to change now the amount that it's pushing out. So that is closer to the top. Texture depth, sorry, it's here now where my mouse is, here. So texture height, I can change and it makes the texture more pronounced. Just got to make sure I have 3D preview on so I can actually see how it's making this model bigger. So it actually applies that. You can see now I can actually see the bumps. And these are quite pronounced now. That might be too much. The only way that you're really going to be able to know how it's going to look with your printer, your filament settings, your model, your texture file, all these other settings that are getting applied is to test it. So what I would recommend, and there's no feature of this right now in BumpMesh, but you just write down the key settings and then you test it, right? I've seen a few people like test textures and then they print the whole part and then realize the texture's not, they print it overnight, texture's not great. And then they do it again. It's like, hang on, just print like a tiny little cube with the texture on it and then like just see if it works, right? So you just got to go and test it. So I would like, look, okay, my scale is this. My texture height is 0.25. And then maybe I change the texture height to 0.2. And maybe that, I'm going to test those two things. It's like a change of what, 20%? So that should make like a visual difference. So yeah, that's texture height. Does anyone know what symmetric displacement means? That's a really good one if you're doing like automotive parts or like assemblies, parts that need to fit together. Symmetric displacement is basically talking about when you apply this texture, in the white region, no change to the surface is being applied. Where it's black, it's fully going to the texture height. It's offsetting it by the texture height, right? By 0.2 millimeters. The symmetric displacement is basically taking care of a problem that you would have if you applied a texture to a part that needed to be accurate, like the tolerance, the actual size of it. Because that displacement that you've added affects your tolerance. 0.2 millimeters of a part, say it applied to two sides and it needed to fit in something else, that's a difference of 0.4 millimeters. That might be too big to fit into that space, right? So what symmetric displacement does, where that texture is white, it actually goes into the part by half the amount of the texture height. And where it's black, it goes out of the part, like out of the model by half the amount. So basically it's using the current surface as like a middle point, okay? So if I hit it, so watch the boat now. I'm gonna click on symmetric displacement. See how it goes in a little bit? And then if I click it and I deselect it, it goes out a little bit. It's because if you don't have it enabled, it actually inflates your part. It makes it bigger than it needs to be. So aesthetically, So for aesthetic parts, it doesn't matter, right? You just leave that off. It's totally fine. For parts that need to be tolerant, like good tolerance, just turn it on. That's basically what you're looking at there. The other cool thing, and just ask questions in the chat if you got them, because I'll just keep monologuing otherwise. The other thing is you can invert your model, your texture. So we've got a white and a black texture here. White is doing nothing, black is raising it, but you can actually flip the logic there and just hit invert and see how now it has a totally different feel now. This looks completely different to how it did before. To me, it does anyway. So yeah, you can play with inverting it. You can also play with smoothing this texture. So you know how before I showed two textures, one was just black and white, one is blurred. Where it's gray, it's transitioning. It doesn't go from like the surface to completely raised. It actually transitions where it's gray. You can do that by editing the texture file like I just showed you. I made a blurred file, a blurred texture, but you can also do it with texture smoothing, which is here. If I zoom into my texture and then I go and affect texture smoothing, you can see how it's smoothed out there. Now this really quickly deletes your texture if you go up too much. So you can kind of smooth it out like that. See that? Completely different feel now. So what I would recommend is if you want to like play with texture smoothing is just use a black and white texture and then apply texture smoothing to it. But you can also do cool things because like I haven't actually seen this done like a lot or much at all. I could have parts of this texture smoothed and then like with the gray, like the transition from white to black. And then I could have other parts that don't do that. And therefore, I would have some smoother textures, some more rough textures on this. And yeah, I think I think people could now get really creative with like the textures they apply. You could even like, say you're doing like a flower pot or something, right? You know, so if you applied a texture, great, it would look cool. But then maybe you want the texture to change like throughout the height of this pot. And that is where you could like blur maybe the top of the texture and then keep the bottom more that black and white. So it actually transitions. And then if you think about it, like that is like such fine control over the aesthetics of your part, right? And then also, not to mention, like you could even do this with like, you could even like change the mechanics, how like strong your part is or how rigid it is in certain parts. Because I could really turn up texture height here. I could make this really big. And this part here, I know it's a boat, right? But say I made a cylinder. I could do this to a cylinder, yeah. Let's go add primitive, cylinder. What is it? Cylinder. I go back here, load model. See how quick this is? Isn't this ridiculous? Like how quickly I can apply it? Yeah, anyway. So texture height, I'm going to just turn it up. I'm going to put 3D preview on. Oh, I think I freaked it out. I put it too high. Oh, there we go. So you can see here, it's applied at Tri-Planar. So I'll talk about projection mode next, but I'm going to make this cylindrical. There we go. That looks better. So now I've got this cylinder, and let's say I printed that cylinder just as it was like this with no infill, maybe, yeah, just 2 wall loops. And where's top and bottom layers? Oh yeah, top. Oh yeah, let's make that 0 and 0. So I'm going to have a very thin cylinder, right? Oh, whatever, it's done one bottom layer, that's fine. This is going to be quite squishy, yeah? A very slight texture, this is quite a lot actually. So even if I did this texture, so 0.25, 0.5, you would be really surprised how much extra rigidity you get from that texture. So you can like change mechanical properties like that. Now, I've just shown you that with 0 infill just to like, so in your head, it makes more sense. This also works when your parts are solid, right? Because you're adding more geometric stiffness to it. It's like, you know how they build trusses with I-beams, like these things? Oh, sorry, bridges and stuff. This geometry is stiffer than other geometries in certain directions. So that is why they use that. So the same with BumpMesh applies, like you can make your parts slightly stronger. Okay, so enough about that. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll show you projection mode. That's probably the last thing that I want to show you. So right now, we apply a texture to the model, and that texture is an image. how do we project the image onto the model? That is what projection mode is talking about. So if I reload, it'll hopefully give me my cube. Yep. If I go to planar XY, you can see that in the XY plane, I get my texture just being applied flat. It's just being applied from that direction. That's it. On the sides, it's doing a terrible job at actually getting the texture. I can do planar XZ, changes the orientation. It's from the XZ plane. And then, the same thing is planar XY, just coming from that direction. So for flat pieces, perfect. Because if you just want to apply it from one direction, great brand, no, then you're fine. So planar XY, XZ, and YZ just applies your texture from one direction. But a lot of parts are three-dimensional in nature, and you actually want the texture to be applied from all of those directions, and that is what Tri-Planar does. The problem with Tri-Planar is, if I go into my cylinder, and let's make the size a bit smaller. Let's see. I need a more obvious one. Yeah, there we go. So from each plane, we get the texture applied with Tri-Planar. All three of those planes that we showed before. XZ, it gets applied. And you can see if I look from the XZ plane, it kind of looks okay. And if I go to the other plane, the YZ in this case, it looks okay. But then I've got on the side here, on the edge, can you see that we've got this like weird overlap thing going on? That's because I've got two textures from two different sides. They're like 90 degrees to each other that kind of like overlap. And that's why for cylindrical parts, you actually want to wrap your image around the part and then project it onto it. That's what the cylindrical one does. So you can see like now it's like perfect when I go around my part. Even on the top, it does a good job. I don't know what these lines are. I don't think they show up, or maybe they do, but this is a very new software, so there's still nuance to it. But yeah, cylindrical actually wraps the image file around it. But yeah, Tri-Planar, you can see that we're going to have these like intersecting regions. I think there might be a setting actually to try and reduce this. I'm not sure. Yeah, so use cylindrical when your parts are more circular. And then you got cubic. I'm not 100% sure what the difference with cubic is. Oh, no, sorry, yes, I remember now. So planar XY is going to apply your texture from one direction, from the XY, and then if I enable bottom face, actually, does anyone know? Cubic box. It's going to apply it from every direction. But I think it applies it from both sides and takes an average. Actually, you know what? I might have to get back to you guys on that. I'm not 100% sure on it. So yeah, you can just cycle through them until you find the best one, basically. But actually now remember the last thing that I wanted to show you is if I go a benchy, this is probably the most powerful thing. I should have shown you this first, is you can exclude or include faces as well. So I've got my texture applied to the whole boat. That's by default. I can also brush on where I want it to be applied or not applied. So I can say exclude these triangles, and I can select the triangles. Now that's a bit awkward. So I can hold shift to undo that. And then instead of using a brush for there's a single triangles. You'll remember in STL, there's a bunch of triangles. I can go circle, and this will like give me like a brush tool that I can use. Still awkward for some cases, but you might have things that like require it, or you might even just want to like do funny things like change the texture for like one region. What I really like is the fill tool. So it actually gives you like an angle here that you can change, and that'll change how much it's like trying to like fill. So you can see here, I can like get that face really easily. But then here, with the angle that I've currently got selected, it's only giving me one triangle. So if I change that angle slightly, now I've got that whole face, and I can exclude that whole face from it. Here, I'm still not getting it around the curves. So maybe I need to change my angle a little bit more. No, that was too much. You can see you can kind of like play with it. Yeah, there we go. Now I've just found it where I got the perfect zone and basically selected that whole edge in one click, or a couple of clicks anyway. So exclude and include. If you hold shift, you can undo what you did, like you can re-include it. This is really good, of course, for like, say the top surface. I want to exclude that so it doesn't do that weird thing that we like showed before. Sorry, Joe, you wrote that before. I'm not 100% sure which bit you mean. Probably let me know what you...
when you had it on the top of the cylinder, it had all those lines. It's probably the gussets that it has to cut in it to make it fit on the circle.
Yes, gotcha. Yeah, it tries to wrap it around that like central point. Yeah. So Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different like little settings here. The other one is when I imported this, or especially when it was a cube, right? When it was a cube, each face of this cube is made up of 2 triangles, right? Like when you design a cube and you export as an STL, a lot of the time in those programs, it's going to make it as simple as possible to describe the shape. And this will be made of 2 triangles. If you try to apply a texture, what actually happens is it's got to edit every single triangle. It can only make a triangle go up or down. That's what a texture is like when it's applying to it. The problem is with that is that if you have only 2 triangles on a face, how do you get a leather texture? You can't. There's not enough like resolution there. So what BumpMesh automatically does is it automatically gives you more triangles on your face. It automatically increases the triangle count on your face. So it does change your design very, very slightly by doing that. So this is the resolution button here. Smaller edge length equals finer displacement detail. So if I had a really small leather texture and I wanted to apply it to this cube, I would need to make this resolution smaller because then every triangle edge is going to be smaller, so I have more detail there. So it basically gives you more detail on the model to apply the texture, but once the texture is applied, then the output doesn't need to be millions of triangles because you need the resolution to apply the texture, but you don't need that much resolution when you're printing it. So it automatically reduces the triangle count afterwards. Okay, that's basically what it does. So if I go and export this STL, I could put it into Blender actually to actually show you what that looks like. Let's go there, File, Import STL, and my downloads. Let's go this cube. Now see how it took a while to like load in. Let me rotate my view. So you can see I've got this cube with this texture, and if I go edit mode, look how many triangles there are here. There's so many that it like turns black because the edge of every triangle is black. It's applied so many triangles here. That can be an issue with 3D printing. You won't want to import, especially for more complicated parts. This is going to be a big issue. So what you end up doing in BumpMesh is putting down the output triangles. I don't want that many. Now, if you put it down too much, you're going to lose detail. So I'll export this as an STL. I'm going to go back to Blender. I'm going to hide this initial part, and I'm going to go File, Import again, STL. And the one that I exported the last was here. Import that. Now, it shouldn't take as long to import now. Not that we'll notice, probably not too noticeable. And I'm going to go to edit mode. Did that? Anyone notice a difference there? Let's go next. Do they look visually different to you guys? They don't to me. But the one that I exported, oh no, they're the same size. Sorry, something didn't work right here. Output triangles. I definitely turned this down. That could be a bug. So what it actually is meant to do, let me show you what it's meant to do. So if I import this into Bamboo Studio, so see how they're the same size, the last 2 that I exported? It shouldn't have been because I changed the output triangles. So what you can do in Bamboo Studio as well is go right-click, Simplify Model. And what that does is it'll try and keep detail where it needs it, where there's movement and change in direction. And it will reduce detail where it doesn't need it. So now if I export this as, say, simple cube, and now I put it into Blender. So let me go hide that. File, Import STL, and I'm going to put my simple cube in here. See how quickly that loaded? That went straight away that time. So if I go Tab, you can see here, the triangles are way bigger. But I might have lost some detail because maybe I oversimplified it in Bamboo Studio, okay? And that is where I could actually delete that, put my original one back in, and then I go Simplify Model, and instead of detail level being on medium, maybe I put it on high. And you can see that it's still reduced it quite a lot, like by 92%, or even if I put very high, it's still reduced quite a lot. And then I can hit apply, export. So this is high detail reduction. I'm going to come up with better names here. High detail reduction. Yeah, that makes sense. Very good. File, import STL. And I'm going to put the high detail reduction in there. It took a little bit longer. It wasn't as instant. But you can see here, now I've got more detail around those like changes there. Yeah. So that's what BumpMesh should have done with my model. Maybe I just need to refresh it. It's probably just a bug. It It's still a very new software, but you can see that I've got a lot more detail there. So you can do that in what do you call it? Bamboo Studio as well. All right, so yes, gone are the days that you just apply fuzzy skin to a surface. You can now use BumpMesh. That is the end of my little presentation. Stop sharing my screen. Any questions?
I've been doing these for my great-grandchildren.
Awesome. Oh, cool.
What I'm wondering about is this embedded part. Will that pick up, say, a leather texture? If I put it on the top surface, does it go to the embedded part as well?
Yeah, it won't. You can apply the texture to the entire part. Yes, if you use BumpMesh, you can apply it to everywhere. It's just going to depend on that print orientation that we're talking about. So you're probably printing that so the R is flat, right? So on that top surface, that texture is going to have a really hard time to actually pick up because it's not going to have enough layers to actually like create the nice effect that you're after. But you can, so I think you want to exclude that cutout region. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. So in BumpMesh, use that exclude tool, and it would be really easy to exclude it from that little cutout because you can use the fill detect, hang on, let me show you some. So in BumpMesh here, if I load in my Benchy, I can use the exclude fill tool. And let's say that was your cutout region there, like inside here. You could just go like that, basically, and exclude it.
Okay.
Oops, sorry. You get the idea. So it's excluding those inner bits. Yeah?
Terrific.
Awesome. All right, we're out of time. See you guys on the next call. Thank you for joining me. As always, let me know in the community if you've got any questions. Basically, we're creating content now based on requests. So we get a lot of people in the shop that talk about that come in and they have questions, and basically I'll just take like some of their questions and or even what they're doing and just try and help them along with that. So yeah, thanks for hanging out with me this morning. We'll catch you next time. See you guys. Bye-bye.